This is going to be the fourth and final of our looks at Greensburg, Pennsylvania in 1799 at the time of the first census. And I'm going to put this on slideshow, after which we'll come back and look at some of these pictures individually. I just wanted to make a few comments from the census itself, give a kind of cross-section of the town, what kind of people we had there in 1799. There were no less than 13 merchants, men who described themselves as such in the census, guys who were running stores in town. There were 6 each of shoemakers and innkeepers. There were 4 each of blacksmiths, carpenters, saddlers, and lawyers. There were 3 each of hatters, wheelwrights, tailors, and tanners. There were 2 each of printers, clockmakers, and tinsmiths. There was 1 each of a potter, a nailer, a wagon maker, brickmaker, a weaver, a doctor, a plasterer, and no doubt a lot more that you could find if you looked at the census. And what I want to do is go back to our starting point. This is Main Street. We are looking up Main Street from the intersection of Ottoman Street here and Main Street. There's a tavern on the corner here called the General Washington. There's a shoemaker here at number 2. At number 3 we had Andrew McCulley, a guy who made things out of copper and tin. These were the people who made the stills at the time of the Whiskey Rebellion. And right above Andrew McCulley was John Wells, number 4. He was the fellow who collected the tax on the people who were making the distilled spirits. You can't help wondering if he was watching who was buying the stills. This is an ad for Andrew McCulley, an ad for Adam Turney, who was also a copper and tinsmith who had that shop after Andrew McCulley. John Wells, the collector of the excise, put this ad in the newspaper, telling people in no uncertain terms that they better show they were going to be liable to pay and be subject to seizure and forfeiture. Probably not a popular guy in the old town. This was Andrew McCulley in the census down here, copper and tinsmith. Up here we have Joseph Harwick, or Herwick, who was a wheelwright. He made wheels for such things as wagons, spinning wheels. He would also have made the things for little round things for chairs and stools. This was Herwick's place up here at number 5. This looks inside of a wheelwright shop. A guy at the lathe making things out of wood. The lathe was turned by the great wheel, and the great wheel was turned by an apprentice. He was the motor. Another look at a wheelwright shop. Here is a guy pounding the spokes into the hub of a wheel. Here's a guy over here on the lathe making a wheel, and you have an apprentice back here turning the great wheel. Human energy. We move down here to number 6. That was occupied by a carpenter named Robert Cooper, who incidentally purchased that place in 1796 for 250 pounds. Interesting that as late as that, late 1700s, they should still be using the English system of currency. A carpenter was also an important guy in town, but also working very much in the old European tradition of cottage industry. meaning that most of the people who were working right at home. Here's a carpenter working, pushing the old jack plane. That was his wife, probably working with her distaff, doing fabric work. The little boy, probably with a basket of bundles of tow, which was the beginning of the fabric processing. And here you have one of the major tools of the carpenter, the jack plane, which was a jack of all work. We often take the nice, smoothly planed lumber for granted. But back then, it was a matter of making that stuff by hand. You didn't have the electric planers. You had to cut that stuff down by hand. Not easy work. We come to the end of this little production. We were up here on Main Street, North Main Street, and it's time to say so long again. And we may see you again for another little production on early Greensburg. So long now. Bye.